Everybody, welcome back. Great to be here. And it was really great to hear from Alex Tremble. I wanted to point out that you can learn more about him at alextremble.com, and he's on all kinds of social media channels as well. And I didn't say anything, but I do want to thank WTOP and Federal News Network. I'm in their studio today. And an interesting little note. Being in a professional studio with real equipment, and it's not like being in my home office with my little camera. There's a real microphone here, and so I'm sitting here and I'm getting cues from a fellow here in the room, and I'm trying to figure out what is going on. Apparently, so I have an ink pen, and it blew up in my hands, and I have blue ink wet all over my hand, and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to put this on my face, or I'm going to put it on the studio or something, and apparently trying to wipe that off is picked up by these tremendously powerful microphones. So, they say in Zoom land you have to add something a little personal. There you go. And thanks again to Mike Causey and all the crew here at WTOP for letting us use this studio. The federal benefits panel is next. Very excited about this. We're going to hear from three amazing speakers. First panelist is Tammy Flanagan, providing retirement and planning assistance to federal employees since 1985. First began her career as a retirement benefit specialist at the FBI. Anyone from the FBI, Tammy, we will always treat you with the greatest respect. But Tammy, you've seen her articles. She's well written and talks throughout federal benefits circles. Ed Zurndorfer, CFP. You're also a chartered financial consultant. I didn't know you're both. And you're a CLU, Chartered Life Underwriter, and a CEBS. Ed, you beat me. You got more than I do. Ed is tremendous talent. We're thrilled that he's here. And he's the owner of Easy Accounting and Financial Services, an accounting, tax preparation, and financial planning firm. Also very proud to introduce Mike Causey. I'm sure you know Mike. Mike's daily column, The Federal Report, unique take on federal news affecting federal employee benefits pay and retirement. Mike covers these topics during his weekly radio show, Your Turn, which airs Wednesday at 10 a.m. Mike, everybody knows you. My aunt was just retired, but she's a longtime attorney at DOL. And I mentioned that you were going to be on this show, and she was, wow, everybody.
Not watching. Spoiler.
It's a thrill you're here. A few quick housekeeping reminders. This event is being recorded. Please submit your questions as we go through the Q&A, as we go through in the Q&A box on your screen. If you have any questions regarding your specific situation, we would recommend setting up time to speak with an expert advisor. So let me go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. We've got quite a few hundred people joining us today, so we're thrilled about that. And I want to not just thank you, but all three of you have really interesting and fascinating careers focused on the federal workforce. And could you just start out telling a little bit about your experience as a Fed, working with Fed? What's been the impact of the federal workforce and these issues on you and your work? Maybe we'll start with you, Tammy.
Oh, thank you, Shane. It's great to be here, and happy to hear that everyone's here joining us online as well. As you said, I started my career way back in the 1980s as a retirement specialist working for the FBI, and that was during the FERS transition. So I really got my feet wet in training with talking to employees about that big decision they had to make back then of whether to stay under the old system or switch to the new. And at the same time, I was starting a family, so I decided to take a break from federal service, and I thought I would stay home with the kids for a few years and then return to my federal career and retire just like my husband just did in the past few years. But as fate would have it, I had the opportunity to do training, and I took that path instead. So ever since then, I've been a retirement trainer at pre-retirement seminars throughout the government. And in the meantime, my husband retired. We moved to Florida, so hence the sleeveless today, because it's going to be about 88 degrees here in southwestern Florida. So I'm happy to be here. Hopefully I can shed some light on retirement issues that are of interest to our audience today.
Excellent, excellent. Mike, looking around the Zoom room, can you go next?
Yeah, I started out as a reporter for the Washington Post, or actually a copy boy for the Post. And I fell into the federal beat. Before that, I had done a number of the kind of things that regular reporters do on a natural beat. I was one of the first people to circumnavigate the Capitol Beltway, inside the Beltway, that sort of thing. Riots, usual things. I was a bodyguard for the critic at the Washington Post who covered the first Beatles concert. So I was there at Uline Arena, fending off 11-year-old girls who were trying to grab him. But mostly I've been covering the federal beat for the Federal Diary for the Post for many years. And the neat thing about it, so often in the news business, the news, good news is not particularly good news for us. The bad news is good news. And we often bring you the bad news and the dark side of it. In this, dealing with people like Tammy and people like Ed, my mother was a career federal civil servant, very low grade, started out as a GS-2 at the Pentagon, wound up as a GS-14, which is, they used to say in the day, not bad for a woman. But I know federal people, and it's nice to be able to have a job where you were generally reporting good news, or you were warning them of the potential of something without, scaring the bejesus out of them. But it's an unusual role for a reporter or a columnist, and I'm really grateful to have had it.
Wonderful. Ed?
Thank you, Shane. Thanks, WAEPA, for having me as a panelist today. I've worked 32 years as a federal employee. And also, I've worked about 35 years as a self-employed person in my accounting and tax practice, insurance and employee benefits, and retirement consulting practice, working with both federal employees and employees who work in private industry. I've also taught federal retirement seminars for about 22 years now, continue to do so. I teach about the benefits. I've learned quite a lot about the federal government and how it works as a result of all this experience and working as a federal employee. I've also learned a lot as a consultant to employees in order to answer their questions about federal benefits. And almost as important, I do consulting and work with individuals who work in private industry, answering their questions about their benefits and retirement. I have a tremendous appreciation of how good federal benefits are, particularly when it comes to health insurance, the thrift savings plan, and the guaranteed pensions. And I have to admit, this is something I try to impress on every one of my federal employee and retiree clients. They should appreciate what they have and make the most of it.
That is true. And maybe later on today, Mike, I know you just wrote today, I think, about federal health benefits. So maybe we can work that in here somewhere today. But my first question, and then I hope that this is a dialogue, and you can also talk to each other. And if you want to speak up on something that I might have addressed to one person, please feel free to add that too. First question. As federal experts, the three of you are keenly aware of the ways COVID-19 has impacted federal workers. And Mike, you spend a lot of time writing about current trends, the need of the federal workforce. What impact have you seen that COVID has taken on feds? Has it affected morale? What are the general impacts from COVID?
I wish I could tell you, because I watch these talking head shows and the reporters will say, well, I talked to a dozen sources today, or I'm hearing from people. I'm not hearing from many people. I think they're busy. I think they're preoccupied. They're working from home. The focus has changed. What I have been doing is going to the email and contacting people who have contacted me in the past about various things. And I ask them, how's it going? What's happening? And I've gotten some absolutely brilliant answers from people. I think the bottom line is we're all in this together. Nobody alive can remember a situation like this. You know, the Spanish flu of the 1918-19 thing, those people are gone. So we're all in this together. It's a brave new world. We're into the era of computers. People who predicted that federal workers would never, or certainly be the last to work from home, have been proven wrong. Hundreds of thousands are working from home. They're doing the job. All of the objections of the 1980s and 90s about what wouldn't work, it seems to be working. And I think it's changed government and the private sector profoundly. And a number of, one of the things that I'm going to focus on next week is when do we go back to work? We're at the office today, but many people are working from home. And the target for so many industries and the government itself had been January of 2021. And now a lot of companies, from the New York Times to Google, are rethinking that. And now it's looking as if July is the new January, that it may be at least until July before many, if not most of us, are back in the office. And of course, this will depend on the success of a vaccine, the distribution of the vaccine, and then how different people handle it from there. So I think this is just a great unknown, and people who give you information with some certainty, I think they're guessing.
Yeah, absolutely. So Tammy and Ed both, I suspect, we've talked about this a little bit with Alex in the last segment, but what's the impact on retirement planning for federal employees because of COVID? People are, in some cases, they're working longer. I've heard from some senior level federal workforce planners that this is a bit of a challenge for them because people who were going to be leaving are delaying that. But talk about this confluence of the pandemic and the rough economy. So maybe we'll start with you, Tammy.
Sure. Yeah, I've noticed a few things throughout this crazy time that we've been living in since March. And some of it has to do with just processing of any information, because since so many people are working from home, whether you're trying to get a hold of Social Security because their local offices are now closed, so you have to call your local office, and you again get a Social Security employee working from home who doesn't necessarily have the luxury to talk to the other people in the room to bounce something off about the windfall provision or some other unique question they might have. So I've found that it's been a little difficult at times to get information on that benefit. When it comes to the Office of Personnel Management and your CSRS or your FERS retirement, they too are working from home, and they do go back to the mine where they process retirements. I think it's once a week or maybe once every couple of weeks to pick up files and to do what they need to do there and come back. So there you can expect a few delays in processing, hopefully not too much. But as Mike was saying, I think a lot of people are delaying their retirement. As a whole, retirements are down about 1,000 cases a month over what they were last year. So I'm wondering if people aren't saving up all their annual leave since they can't go on vacation and maybe waiting to retire December 31st. So I have a feeling, it's just a little intuition, that maybe we'll see a real busy end of the year retirement, or possibly people are just waiting. Maybe they like the fact they're working from home. They don't have to drive in traffic every day. So working is not as bad as it was when you had to fight that rush hour traffic back and forth to work. So it's been interesting. And one last thing, the TSP has modified some of its benefits over the year because of the CARES Act. So there have been extra loan payments available, extra in-service withdrawals available to help people out who have been impacted by COVID-19, because federal employees haven't been immune from the virus. And there have been employees, in all agencies that have been affected, whether individually themselves or their spouse may have lost a job. So the TSP has freed up some of your own money that you can now use to get you through this crisis. So there have been some modifications, even in our health plans, with teledoc and telehealth becoming more available and covered by federal health plans. So all the benefits seem to try to accommodate what's going on with this crisis. And hopefully it will be over at some time in the future, but we don't see that end in sight just yet.
Yeah. On the commute comment, I miss my commute on 270.
I'm sure you do.
That was, yeah. So Ed, I'd love to hear your take on this about preparing for retirement, early retirement. Talk about that, perhaps. What are you seeing in your world with your clients and the folks that you talk to?
Yes, Shane, I've actually seen two main things as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The first thing is I've seen an increasing number of questions that are coming into me regarding benefits, particularly people getting close to retirement. And the main reason why that they're contacting me is because of the shutdown of federal offices. It's a little more difficult to get their questions answered from HR or personnel. They want to contact the TSP or Social Security. It's more challenging to get their questions answered. As I mentioned, particularly people getting close to retirement, they're more in a panic mode. So they really want to get their questions answered, and they're not willing to wait. They want to they got to get that answer now. So that I've seen a number more questions. And the other challenging area I have found is that because of the complete shutdown, kids not being able to go to school, we have the homeschooling, so to speak, and now the kids that are home, daycare centers have closed, particularly when it comes to women who have to be at home now to supervise what's going on. The women a lot of times have expressed their concerns that they may not be able to continue their careers if they have to be at home supervising the kids. This has been particularly keen. I've seen a lot of this in private industry, but even in the federal workforce, many women have had to make the choice about either continuing their careers or staying at home, knowing that the kids are not going to be going back to school, or if they do go back to school, it may be only on a trial basis, and they may end up coming back home because the pandemic is because the virus is spreading in school. I agree with Tammy that many employees may be waiting to the end of this year to see what happens. I'm being prepared for that, for an onrush of questions coming up in November and early December. Can I retire? And in particular, for example, I have somebody who just contacted me. They would like to retire on December 31st, and the numbers are there, and all the person wants to know is, can I really afford to retire? And it's very difficult for me to say to that person yes or no without knowing what the person plans to do after they do retire, because they really don't have a plan what they're going to do. That's another subject I think we'll be talking about later. But the fact is, more questions have come in. There are more challenges as far as how am I going to be able to exist in retirement with the income I may have. And in some cases, I've told people quite outright, you really cannot afford to retire. You have to continue working, even as difficult as it is. You really do not have enough to retire on at this point. You have to continue in federal workforce. We also have to consider there are many federal employees who are miserable for one reason or another. And this really doesn't have anything to do with the pandemic. It's just over the past 4 years, the morale in federal employee offices, and I've noticed this doing seminars, in-house seminars as opposed to webinars before the government offices were shut down, that morale is down, and people have one motivation: just to get out, to retire as soon as possible. And many of these people are not ready financially to retire. So they have to make the most of what they have, and as they get close to the finish line here, they really want to make sure that they have their house in order.
So Mike, you follow trends, and you've been following some of this for a long time around federal savings and future and career moves. Would you say that COVID has made people more cautious in their investment decisions and their life planning? Do you see that as a trend?
I'm not sure that cautious is the right word. I mean, Ed might call it prudent, but people are looking at them more carefully. They are realizing now that when the market goes down, it's not necessarily going to stay down. And a number of people that I have talked with and I have heard from, and I've had do guest columns, were buying during the so-called bad period, and the market has surprised them and done well. Tammy and I were talking the other day privately about another issue, and she had mentioned she'd written for Government Executive Magazine, and she'd mentioned that she thinks there's a possibility that there'll be a retirement tsunami, you know, the one that's been predicted since the 1990s. Hasn't happened, but it might happen in January. And when you look at it, I mean, people aren't taking vacation because there's nowhere to go. The kids are home, so you might not be on that wonderful trip to the Bahamas. But for a variety of reasons, people have changed their patterns, not spending as much. And when and if they are freed at last and things go back to normal, you could well see this. And this subject Tammy and I were discussing is, you know, they're always saying, depending on which financial planner you deal with, you should have 6-8 months of savings to tide you over. And they all vary, but they all say you should have it. Most Americans don't. Studies have shown that the average American, if they were hit with an extra $400 bill, couldn't handle it. We're seeing this now with the government payments to people, the desperation involved in it. But one of the things I think it's thrown everybody into midlife crisis is that when and if they do retire, if there is a retirement tsunami, if, as Ed said, the morale is that bad and people are getting out, if the pipeline is blocked, you're going to need a lot of money to live on until Uncle Sam starts cranking in the proper amount of your retirement annuity. So it's all the more reason to be prudent and think about savings and look at your investments depending on your age and your risk tolerance as a relatively long haul, something that may have to get you through 10, 20, even 30 years of retirement. You could be retired in many cases as long as you work.
As we found when we looked at the obituaries the other day, Mike.
Three in the Washington Post who had long government careers, about 30, 31 years, and yet people run the numbers, they were actually retired longer than they had worked. And these are people who had worked long and hard. So it's possible, and you need to consider it.
So we're closing up. I'm sorry, we're getting close to the Q&A session. So please put your questions in the Q&A box. But Tammy, perhaps a bridge to that. Could you talk a little bit about? We talk a lot about pre-retirement, of course. This is exceptionally important to many people. But what about mid-career folks? Mm-hmm. So if we could do that in 1 or 2 minutes,
sure.
They get a little left out in the whole discussion. What if you're in your 30s and 40s and you've got a path to look at here? What are you going to do with your retirement? Talk about that for a minute.
Well, I think it's just like in the generations of a family where the elder family members mentor the younger folks and tell them what they need to do to prepare for life. I see this a lot in the federal service as well, where the supervisors or the senior employees will tell those mid-career or new employees how important retirement planning is, whether they've done a good job of it and they're passing on their good fortune, or whether they wish they would have done more and they tell those younger employees, how important it is to at least save 5% in your thrift. Don't leave that matching government money on the table. So we see a lot of that. In fact, when I teach a seminar I'll sometimes in a pre-retirement seminar see a 35-year-old sitting there, and I'll say, why are you here? And he says, well, because my supervisor told me I had to come. They weren't going to let me do my job today unless I came to this training, because it's so important to prepare ahead of time. Gone are the days of the single benefit CSRS system that all you had to do was work 30 years, be 55, and walk out the door. It really wasn't much planning involved. But today, with the FERS system being a 3-tiered system, you're coordinating Social Security distributions with TSP distributions, as we were talking about how to save in the TSP, whether how much to save or how to allocate it. So there are a lot of really important decisions employees make early in their career that can impact whether or not they can retire at 57 or 62, or maybe not till 70 for financial reasons, let alone, as Ed was pointing out, the mental transition that you make from employment to retirement. I do meet a lot of employees who are also happy in their government job. I kind of see the opposite of what Ed sees, where employees are like, yes, I can afford to retire, but do I really want to retire? I love what I do. I want to see this project to the finish. So we see both ends of that. I do meet employees who are waiting to get out because something's changed up above in the supervisory ladder, so they're ready to make that move. But I've also seen employees who are well prepared, and they're just waiting for the day when they wake up to say, this is the day. But be sure to plan ahead. I think it's ultimately important today more than ever before.
Yeah, excellent. So let's go to some questions from people online here. So this is very much related. So maybe Ed and Mike can take this one, since if you're a younger or a mid-career Fed, how do you pick the right TSP? How do you not get caught up in the moment and take, this is my word adding to the question, how do you make sure that your decision is a good long-term decision and not caught up in chasing, returns in different funds that might feel good, feel interesting right now, but in the long term isn't going to work well? We all know that. So maybe we'll start with Ed, and then love to hear if you have something on that, Mike.
Well, you mentioned, Shane, this is for a new employee. How do you make the right decision when it comes to choosing the right TSP fund? Well, in reality, the TSP will make the decision for you if you do not make the decision. And recently, the TSP has changed the way they do that to the benefit of the employee. It used to be when a new employee was hired and did not decide which TSP funds to invest in, the TSP automatically put the employee's contributions into the G fund, the government securities fund, which in my opinion for a new employee is the worst fund because it doesn't grow over time. And a new employee wants to realize that they're starting their federal career, and the money that they're going to be investing in a TSP needs to last until the day the employee or eventually retiree or a loved one no longer needs that money, and that unfortunately is death. It has to last for hopefully at least 70 to 80, maybe as many as 80 years. The fact is, by having the money in the G fund, it's just not going to grow sufficiently over time and overcome inflation. That being said, the TSP this year changed the fund the fund that the contributions are automatically invested in into a life cycle fund that coincides closest to the year that the employee should be retiring, which is about 30 years out. And that L fund would be more aggressive. Most of that money would be almost all of that money would be invested in the 3 stock funds, the C fund, the S fund, and the I fund. That being said, when I teach a new employee seminar, I explain all this information regarding why a new employee, when it comes to investing in TSP, has to be aggressive. They got to take more risk by investing in the stock funds. The disappointment for me comes when it comes to these new employee seminars, and so few employees show up. when Tammy mentioned that she met with a client in which the employee was required to go to the new employee seminar, that's music to my ears. I just did a new employee seminar for the agency had about 500 new employees, and only 10 showed up. This was a webinar. Tremendously disappointing to me. And the reason I say that is over the years, I've done these new employee seminars. I've done many retirement seminars. And I'm happy to say that when I do the retirement seminars, most of the people say to me, Ed, you gave us good information during this retirement seminar, but there's something that's missing in your retirement seminar. And I said, there was one problem with your retirement seminar. And I said, what's that? Where were you 30 years ago? Why couldn't you given us this information 30 years ago when I first started in federal service? I wouldn't have made these mistakes, including investing in the wrong TSP funds. And this is exactly my point, that information is very important. It's golden. And new employees have to realize that as starting their careers, when they start their careers, they're starting to save for retirement. It starts at that point. They can't wait. They have to contribute to the TSP. They got to invest in the right funds. And if they can't make the decision will be made for them. And now the TSP is making the right decision, but employees also have to remember, as they go through their careers, circumstances change. They may have to make adjustments, but they have to remember that the TSP is a long-term investment plan. Long-term means not between now and the day they retire, but between the day they or a loved one no longer needs that TSP account, which unfortunately is dead. Over the years, the thinking has changed. I remember my parents, who didn't live that long after they retired, and my grandparents, they didn't live that long after they retired. But today, retirees, the challenges of retirement, one of the biggest challenges is to make sure that one does not outlive their income. And if you're too conservative in your investing when it comes to the TSP or IRAs, your investments are too conservative. They'll not overcome inflation. They will not grow sufficiently, and there will not be enough income from your TSP, your 401k, your IRA to make sure that it lasts throughout retirement.
Speaking of inflation, yeah, thank you. Speaking of inflation, Mike, I think maybe it was just today you put out a piece. Let's shift a little bit to health insurance since open season is almost here. Health insurance is one of the biggest expenses any family makes during the year, and it's not just expense of premium, but it's also copays and out of pockets and perhaps deductibles. So we have an interesting question here, and it says, why are health insurance premiums going up so much in costs for next year? And I thought I saw in your article it was 7%, and was it 7%? And honestly,
4.9 on average.
So tell me if I'm wrong, but I've been doing in the corporate health plan world for a long time. That doesn't feel huge to me. Is that huge in the federal space?
It's much of this is your own, the way you look at things. But remember, this is an average. There are a couple of hundred plans in the program. The average is taken from the top 5 or 6, which have 90% of the people in it. The Mississippi River, I always say, is 4.9 feet deep on average. But try wading across it, between Cairo and Carthage. It's not going to work. It's an average. I think you can safely say, if you've been in the federal health program, to back up, first place, it's one of the best programs in the country. And I commend Ed for having the nerve to tell his clients that they have a good system going here. It's important to know that they have good retirement, they have good health, they have good pay, they have job security. It's important to know. A lot of people don't like to hear that. They take it almost as an insult, but it's true. But that said, with the health insurance, if you've been in the federal health program for 5 years, I would say that probably most of you are in the wrong plan. And that's because most people don't change plans. They don't do any shopping during the open season. If you're a retiree or somebody who's 65 and over, they're probably, the odds are, and I'm making this number up, 80% of you are in the wrong plan. And the reason is plans change, people don't. And you need to shop around. And as Tammy has pointed out in numerous columns as well, we're always saying every year, if you shop, you can get comparable coverage, much less out of pocket, much lower premiums. Your doctors in the network from the same plan, you may go from standard to basic or whatever they call it, but people just refuse to shop. But if they would, many people could save $1,000, $2,000 next year if they would shop around. And as Tammy has also pointed out, for retirees, if you have Medicare, look at some of these other options, high definition or high deductible plans, which actually allow you to build yourself a savings account, and Medicare Advantage plans. If you do the right thing, don't quit your insurance, but suspend it, you can save a lot of money.
Mike, if I may just say something, or Shane, Mike, one of the problems is the fact that when you say shop, people don't know what they're shopping for. When I teach classes on choosing a health insurance plan, one of the things I tell federal employees and annuitants, just don't look at the premiums. People think, well, that's a better plan because it has a cheaper premium. That's not necessarily true. You got to look at all the aspects of the plan in terms of deductibles, co-payments, co-insurance. Many federal employees, when they look at the premiums, they say, well, that's a better plan because it has a cheaper premium, don't realize they're paying more out of pocket, more co-payments, more for co-insurance, or deductibles are more. And they could be in a better plan by paying a little more in premiums, maybe having less in co-insurance, or for that matter, if they find a plan, maybe they're paying more in premiums and their deductibles might be a little higher, not taking full advantage of, let's say, of the flexible spending accounts. I am tremendously shocked by the number of employees I run into who do not realize they have access to a healthcare flexible spending account. As you mentioned, Mike, they are the high deductible health insurance plans in which you have access to a health savings account. Employees are not even aware of HSAs where they could save money, but they cannot just focus on the premiums. They also, in talking about the upcoming season, if they do choose a plan they think is better, and they have favorite doctors, they have to make sure that their doctors are in the plan. They're preferred, they're in the preferred network. That's another thing that employees tend to forget about, that they find a good plan and then they end up getting the plan, but their doctor says, well, I'm not in that network. I'm not a preferred network. And then you're going to end up paying more. So there are a lot of things.
The network is so important
for health insurance.
The network is so important. Some people are absolutely, and there's nothing wrong with having a physician that you've had for a long time, especially if that physician tracked with you through an illness. But you're right, the network is critical and often forgotten. You don't want to be surprised. You want to make sure that you specifically take physicians that you currently have and call their offices and ask them, and make sure you ask the right question. Make sure you ask, are you a preferred doctor in this network? Not, will you take a payment? Because they'll all take a payment. That's not the right question. So just be careful with that one. Tammy, we've got about 10 minutes left. I'd like to get your take on this one, since health insurance is such a big deal.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think one time I was writing a column on health insurance because I do a lot of those during open season, and someone made the comment, what does health insurance have to do with retirement? And I was thinking to myself, oh my goodness, health insurance has everything to do with retirement, because you spend most of your money on healthcare in the last third of your life. So that's when it's so important to make sure that you have a plan that works for you. Like Ed said, you want to make sure it fits your needs, but also you don't want to pay more than you have to. With these rising costs of healthcare, you want to be sure that you're in a plan that really works for you, you're not paying more than you have to out of pocket. So I think it is confusing because, as Mike says, we have about 294 different health plans. And in any given region of the country, you have 30 individual plans you can choose from. So it's important that you narrow down your choices. So you look at the plan that you're currently in and stack that up against other plans that you might be interested in. There's two wonderful tools that are out there to help federal employees choose a plan and narrow down their choices. And you can find links to both of those at OPM's website. If you go to opm.gov, click on insurance, then on healthcare, and then there's a plan comparison program there, as well as a link to Walt Francis's checkbook guide to federal health plans. And if you are in the Washington, D.C. area, that checkbook guide lets you enter your favorite physicians and providers to make sure, as Ed said, that those providers are part of the network of that new plan you might be looking at. What I also find that employees, there's a lot of misunderstandings or mistruths maybe about changing health plans. One that I hear all the time is, and I don't want to pick on Blue Cross, but that is the largest enrollment of all federal health plans. We have a huge enrollment in both Blue Cross Standard and Blue Cross Basic. So there's some people who think that their doctor only takes Blue Cross, so that's why they can't switch plans. When in fact, their doctor probably takes Blue Cross, Cigna, United Healthcare, and who knows which other major health plan network. So doctors, they want a business as well, so they're going to usually take multiple networks and become either preferred providers or within that network. So don't be afraid to change plans because you don't want to change doctors. Chances are your doctor participates in more than one network. And as Mike was saying, when you turn 65 or when you retire and you're over 65, that's an ideal time to look at different health plan options, because some of the federal health plans offer incentives for federal retirees to enroll in Medicare A and B. Because when you turn 65 as a federal retiree, your federal health plans cannot require, they won't drop you if you don't take Medicare. So they have to provide some type of an incentive to allow Medicare to become your primary payer, and then they can step back and become secondary payer, which keeps the premiums down lower for everybody in that plan. So you might find a plan that will waive their own deductibles, co-payments, and co-insurance. So when you're getting outpatient or inpatient healthcare, you have zero out of pocket. You pay your Medicare premium, which is kind of pricey, so that's another hesitation people have, but you pay your Medicare premium, your federal health plan premium, and that's all you pay. You'll pay your prescription copays unless you take a Part D plan, which most federal retirees don't need Part D. So you will want to find a plan, especially if you're filling prescriptions, that has a good prescription drug benefit. You might also want to add a supplemental dental and vision plan if your health plan doesn't cover that, because Medicare doesn't cover routine dental or vision care as well. But your regular medical care, inpatient, outpatient, some skilled nursing care, a little bit of home health care, all of that comes into play when you combine Medicare with a good federal health plan that caters to the needs of retirees who have Medicare. So that's another huge time in your life when you really shouldn't consider whether or not to take Medicare. I think it's a good idea to enroll in Medicare A and B, but that's a good time to reconsider which health plan you're in that will work with that Medicare coverage. Some of them even give you a reimbursement for part of that Part B premium. And we also have FEHB plans that now offer Medicare Advantage benefits, which again is a plan specifically designed for people with Medicare. So there's a lot of choices. The key is to narrow it down to maybe your top 3 or 4, then you can make a decision.
If I can just say one more thing as a follow-up to Tammy.
Yeah.
I can't agree more with you when it comes to Medicare. Just to prove my point, I've been on Medicare A and B almost 5 years now. I'm enrolled in a federal employees health insurance plan, PPO. And in those 5 years, I have not paid 1 penny to a doctor, to a hospital. Everything's been paid 100%. When people ask me, what's your deductible? I said, what's that? When they ask me, what is your copay? I said, what's that? I don't know what you're talking about. Seriously, I've not paid anything. Lastly, I just want to mention that in looking for federal employee health insurance plans for 2021, employees and annuitants may want to make sure that their plans offer telehealth. Many of them don't want to go to the doctor. They prefer to speak with their doctor online. Also, mental health coverage. Given the pandemic, many people unfortunately are having some issues, some mental health issues, and make sure their plans offer mental health coverage.
I think that's all really great advice. Thank you for that. You know, in the corporate world, you don't see these kinds of choices with health plans, so it's a little bit easier. It's harder for feds. The good news is it may take more work for you to figure it out, but your options are so much more. So I'm with you. What I'm sensing is take the time to understand your options and exercise that. So we've got 5 minutes left, and I want to shift gears a little bit here. Something I've been seeing in some of the trade and the federal press. Locality pay, is that going to change in 2021? Can you guys talk about that a little bit? We have 4 minutes left.
Do you mean is locality divisions going to change, like the areas?
It says, when will we know if locality pay is changing in 2021? That's the exact question.
Probably in 2021.
I think they're asking if there's going to be a pay raise, period, in 2021, which would be both standard and locality. And the answer is, as usual, out of Washington, we don't know. The White House early in the year suggested 1%. They've asked for 3% for the uniformed military. Now the 1% seems to have fizzled given the economic conditions of the country. I would not be at all surprised if there is no federal pay raise, or depending on how a variety of things go, if they don't approve one later next year, that might be retroactive. But I wouldn't count on it. And Tammy's correct. You need to be careful with the terminology, because there's a pay raise and then there's a locality component. The pay raise is the big one. Locality is a small amount tacked on based on city by city.
Mm-hmm. I don't even know if I want to say this or not. Any thoughts about, I'm assuming the government's going to be open for the next 6 months?
You know something?
Say yes, Mike.
Yes. I would assume so. There's
it looks that way.
Distinct possibility that you could have a government shutdown December 11th. You know, we said it couldn't happen, and it happened over Christmas recently. So all bets are off. But yeah, I think we will still be functioning. We'll probably have one of these this time next year. Hope so.
Yeah. Yeah. So we have 2.5 minutes. So you know, we have talked about retirement. We've talked about health insurance. We haven't gone much into other, except a little bit about general pay increases and then locality pay on top of that. If you guys could each pick a certain message, maybe 30 seconds or so each, from your lens, looking at federal employee benefits, what's a message you'd like to leave today's talk with? So you want to start, Tammy?
Oh, sure. Yeah, 30 seconds, give me 30 hours. But in this case, I'm going to say that don't forget, I'm sure most, if not all of our audience is under the FIRST retirement system. And that is a 3-tiered system that is wonderful because it is flexible. You don't have to turn all 3 benefits on at once. So think of it as kind of like one of those little puzzles you might have had as a kid that you slide the letters to try to put them all in order. You want to make sure you're putting everything in the right order. You know, generally that means you're going to make sure that you're ready to retire from federal service, whether that means you're moving to a second career, whether that means you're retiring permanently, you're going to enjoy that life after retirement. Then comes the TSP and Social Security. Don't have that knee-jerk reaction that means I'm going to take all 3 on the same day. Maybe you're going to get a big lump sum leave payout. You can delay the TSP and Social Security for 4 or 5 months. Maybe you're going to delay your Social Security till you're 70 because of the delayed credits that make it so much more generous. Take a little bit more out of your TSP to get you over that hump, or get a part-time job to get you there. So keep in mind, you're coordinating 3 different benefits. And sometimes it requires some help. So there's people like myself, Mike, Ed, WAEPA, everybody's out there willing to help you. Ask for help. You have to ask the right questions.
Excellent. Ed, 30 seconds.
My suggestion, advice to all federal employees, get educated and do it from the beginning and continue throughout your career. Understand your benefits. And how do you do that? Well, obviously there are no seminars going on at agencies, but there are webinars that are available, for in some cases for free, that employees and soon to be and retirees for that matter can avail themselves to learn about all their benefits, everything that includes CSRS, FERS, TSP, Social Security, financial planning, you name it, it is out there. Education is golden, because by being an educated consumer, you'll be much better off in the end, and not to be the victim of unfortunately, of sales pitches that many senior citizens particularly are victims of.
Mike, what do you think?
Well, focus on what you can do. You can't determine the pay raise. You can't determine when and if you're going to go back. You can't determine what the government's going to look like in 2021 and beyond. Right now, November and December, you have the open season for health insurance. You can, if you shop around, save $1,000 to $2,000 next year. As Ed would pointed out, people look for the cheapest premiums, but there are some who actually go for the more expensive plans. They call them Cadillac plans, and they figure if the premiums are high, it must be better. Check to see that your doctor is in the web or the network. And remember that most federal agencies now have online services through Washington Consumer Checkbook, where in about 15 minutes, you can compare different plans, see if your doctor's in the network, look at the premiums. And it's not fun, it's not easy, but it's certainly worth doing.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we are, I'm very thankful. Mike, Tammy, Ed, you guys were great as always. Love to hear your expertise and listen to the human side of this too, which you guys have all delivered. So thank you, one and all. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's a pleasure.
Okay, so I have some closing remarks here, and join WAEPA. So if this is a member meeting, which is a technical requirement that 501c9s need to do. And so the part of the meeting where we talk about the organization itself, we want to make it interesting for you, but there's also a reason, an IRS reason to do that. The other pieces of this conference are something that we've added as a benefit for you. We also have opened this up to non-members. Originally, we had thought only members, but that's not really our mission. Our mission is to provide valuable information, products too, but valuable information to all civilian feds. So if you're not a member, you need to join WAEPA today. If you do it today, I am sorry to say there is a $2 fee. It's a once in your lifetime, $2 to open the door. At some point in the near future, we will remove that, but that's the ticket to get in. Yeah, please do it. There are a lot of reasons to do it, even if you don't buy any of the insurance products. The E&Y financial planning program is one such reason. Limited time offer. We have a GI offer out right now, $100,000 guaranteed life insurance. That offer ends 11/8. You can see the website there, waepa.org/100K. This is a tremendous way to, the premium isn't affected, but you're not, you don't go through the same rigor in the underwriting. So that's certainly worth doing. The second bullet up here is waepa.org referral. If you're a current member, over 50% of our new members come through a referral by existing members, over 50%. This is an astonishingly high number in this business. So I would encourage you to do the same. Tell your friends, hey, I saved X number of dollars, either supplementing or replacing FEGLI. Check it out. It's a good way to save people that you know some money. And then the final bullet here is checking your email. We will send a link to Alex Tremble's book, ebook, and I understand it's a great read. I haven't read it yet, but it's on my list. And I believe that is the conclusion of the event today. Thank you all very much for attending. It was great to see you. Next year, we'll be at the I hope so. We'll be at the Ronald Reagan Center. Please join us live for that event. I'm assuming it'll be live. And if not, we'll be virtual. But looking forward to seeing you then. Thanks so much, and appreciate your time. Bye.